Kayla's on there. We're going to ask you a question too, Kayla. And Peter White, he will get a question.
Kelly Shield.
Oh, is Kelly there?
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, you need to turn your camera on. Hey, Kayla.
Hello. Not often do I hear my name in these calls. Hello, everyone.
I'm just running a hit list of people that I'm going to ask questions back to. So you too, Kelly, you ready to go? Not a free lunch here.
I reckon she's just got a photo there, haven't you, Kel?
She's got him there. She moves. She didn't even respond. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Sorry, I get a free pass because I'm actually on holidays in Hayman Island. So, and I'm still here, so that gives me my free pass.
You are a shocker.
I wouldn't be logging in if I was on Island.
You must really want to hear about it. You've got these experts here. Look at it.
Yeah, please. G'day, Brett. How are you, mate?
Too.
Not bad, not bad.
Hey, Brett. Hey, Cal. How you going?
Great, guys. How we doing?
Very well, thank you. We got enough?
He's
We're
up
all
and
in?
about.
Yeah, I think so.
Where's
About 21.
Melbourne.
Oh,
As in
there'll be more.
Melbourne Football Club.
Callum, you'd be up and about.
It was the first. That's what I said. It's the first thing he said to me when I saw him on Monday or
The
Tuesday.
demons are back. Yes, good to see. Welcome. Upwards.
It'll just keep going.
I keep going. Okay, I'm not going to get distracted by people beeping and coming in. So welcome, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bruce McFarlane. I'm the CEO of BDC Partners. I'm also on the Victorian State Chapter Committee, and this is one of our Victoria chapter events. We've got a couple of former members of our committee and a couple of current members on the line, so thanks for joining. Today, if possible, we'd love it if you had your cameras on and we turn this into an interactive session. So good to see you all. We are recording it, so you will get that later on. If you do want to ask questions, our trusted Lieutenant here, Lisa, is going to be watching that so I don't miss those questions, but we've got some time for questions all the way through the session. Today, we're going to be talking all things ops. So as you can see on the slide there, feedback, coaching, support, FACs, use of data reports and compliance. So we're going to whiz through a few different areas of operational things. And we know we've got a panel of experts around the table here, but we've also got a lot of experts online to tap into their knowledge as well. So just around the table, I'll start with Michael Ermer, who's at the end here. So Ermer Consulting has got his own consulting business. He's consulting with us at Bubba Pizza as well, and he's obviously got a number of years' experience at some big brands, including Boost Juice and Baker's Delight, just to name a couple. So welcome, Michael. We've got Beth Pocklington as well, Head of Franchise Development. So that's a development role at the moment, but we know that you have worked in operational roles in a couple of other big franchise systems. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you, Bruce.
Going around the table, I've got Mark Manette here, who's the General Manager Ops at Churro. So welcome, Mark.
Okay.
And Anna Bruce is National Operations Manager at Nurse Next Door. So welcome. Do I need to introduce? And we've got Helen and Lisa from the FCA table here as well for their input. So welcome. So today's all around, how it's about franchisee success. Really what we're looking at is how to assist our franchisees in making them successful and profitable, which with the overlay of that is what sort of training and support are we providing to them. But we're going to start, so we're going to whiz through a few different topics here. But the first one is around franchisee feedback. So there's various ways to obtain feedback from franchisees. There's individually, there's collectively, there's formal ways, as a franchisor. So, and I'm going to go to you because I know that at Nurse Next Door you did a formal process of obtaining feedback. So tell us a little bit about the feedback that you got and the process that you went through on obtaining feedback from your franchisees.
So we used an external, you guys that ran our survey for us, which was great. We had really good engagement on it. So we had, I think, 31 or 33 partners at the time, and they all actually completed it. So we did do a lot of follow-up and having to chase that up, but it was the first one, so they were quite engaged in it and willing to provide feedback. We did, like most surveys, very generalised information across multiple sectors of the business, including marketing, trading, support, leadership. The feedback that we actually got back was no surprise. There was nothing that actually came back that we went, oh, that's really interesting or a surprise. So I guess that actually reiterated that we had really good feedback loops prior to the survey going out. It did, and it also depended on the life cycle. So we were a new franchise in the market at the time, so we had some of the early adopters and then very new ones. So we could actually pick the early adopters that had actually gone to that fee stage. So it was a new platform to have a whinge about how many fees they were paying, and the new ones had their enjoyment of the business, because they were still in those early days, was also low. But if we went back and did it again now, the challenges that they're facing at that point, they've really come through and been able to move ahead.
So use Franchise Business Review, which is with global benchmarking in there. So, and when you, with the results, delivering the results back, was it a group sort of session that you delivered the results, or how did you approach that?
We actually ended up putting them back just in email, and we talked really more around high level, the scoring across the network, because it was quite good. I think we had 80, we had a score of 80. So we just talked in email, just put everything in writing, basically, some of the key things that we found and some of the initiatives that we were actually looking at based on those, but more so just where we sat in the top quartile.
Yeah, no, it's great. And to be able to benchmark that, but I guess the thing around your comment earlier about there was nothing new, well, which is fantastic, because I think even with employee reviews at the end of the year, if something comes up that you've never heard before as an employee, you'd be like, where did that come? Like, why didn't I know about this earlier? So I think, franchisors and franchisee relationship to do that. And then since you've had the results, has that formed part of, business planning or strategies to support franchisees? Were there things that you needed to focus on a little bit more or less through that?
Were some of the main things that we sort of looked at was, how do we increase and maintain those feedback loops and ensure that we have transparency? We actually want people to come and tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly. As I always say, feedback is a gift. You can't fix what you don't know about. So some of the things were a bit more regular touch points from more senior leaders, and so that they can get that direct feedback. But other than that, we didn't really change anything. There were some action points, of course, that came out that were more specific to an individual person or a partner or a group of partners. Which we did, put in at the time. One of the things was, benchmarking. So we have rolled that out and looking to continue rolling that out further with more opportunities to benchmark across our system. But everything else, really was absolute, we already knew what was going on. And more so nothing was a real, except for the fees for those more.
Oh, gee, they complain about the fees. That's not
I know, very unusual. There were no real trends, I guess, that were big issues across the whole network.
Yeah. And have you? Sorry, I didn't. A question without notice, but the data, in terms of recruitment, I know this is not a recruitment thing, but is that something that the data has been used in the recruitment process, or?
Yes, we do. Yeah, of course, use that a little bit.
We've got a success rating of 80%. Because that's another reason that can be used. So, so what about you? So at Churro,
similar. We've always used external. So historically, FRI, Greg Nathan. So what we would do is do the yearly survey, which is a big survey, and then take action items out of that as leadership team. Share it. So it's broken down into departments. For me and ops, our regional managers each get a report, on the punctuality, what sort of business knowledge or local area market, how they're supporting their franchisees. So ops specific, I could sit down with each regional manager and then look at the gaps we need to close. But what we also did really well is we would do 6 months later, we'd do a pulse survey to see how our franchisee sort of satisfaction's moving and then benchmark it. And for us also, it was just tied back into department KPIs, tied into, the leadership team's bonuses. So everyone had that sort of drive to move that satisfaction.
Yeah. What about you guys?
Yeah. We used to do them irregularly.
We being Boost.
Oh, we being Boost. Yeah, okay.
Which hat are you wearing at the
Which hat?
time?
Well, I was there for a
We
little
being
while.
BFT.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they used to do them too. Okay. Thanks for that one, Bruce. So we used to do them at Boost irregularly, but I can say a couple of things. So we certainly didn't email out the results because most franchisees wouldn't have read them. We certainly took them back in and presented them back. But the important thing that we made sure that we did were that there were tangible actions out of it and that there were actions that they could hold us accountable for.
So it did form part of the business planning process then.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other bit to your point around using it in recruitment, the results in recruitment, while I was there, the business was sold like in 13 years, like 3 times. That satisfaction rating was a huge attractive point to potential acquirers as well.
Yeah, and in the US, because FBR is a US tool, and in the US, private equity use it. They offer as part of due diligence. They'll do surveys. Yeah. So it's interesting as to the health of the network to get an external view on that rather than just a Survey Monkey sort of survey you do yourself.
Yeah, and the NP, what's it called?
Net Promoter Score.
Net Promoter Score, the NPS was a huge, that was in a lot of the documents that went out to potential acquirers.
Yeah. Anyone else? I've got Matt there. So, did you like Anna's answer? Was that the right answer, mate? You're on mute, I think.
Joined after Anna spoke, but I'm sure she spoke very eloquently and answered all the questions.
Good.
Yeah.
But anyone else has done, used external or internal survey processes and, or found out something that you didn't think was happening in your network? Any comments or questions? All good?
The regularity of it's pretty important, I suppose. There's other businesses that do them and they do a 6-monthly check and come back to it. So it's pretty important, the regularity. I know from a Boost perspective, we didn't do it nearly regularly enough.
And it's interesting. So we're obviously working with a US company that does it pretty regularly with people, but sometimes, and even at FRI, I know John Cooksey talks about an example where there was a new owner and so, things were pretty bad. It was COVID. It was shit. Everyone was having a bad time. And so lots of businesses I know particularly in Australia go, we don't need to, we know how they're feeling. There's not that many of them. We know how they're feeling. But, if you can put a survey out there and it might be bad and that's all right, just own the fact that some of it's not great. Either things have, not, healthy in different parts of the business, because the only way is up then, or hopefully the only way is up then. And so then doing it again, back to your regularity point, is not just do it once and then never do it again. Whether it's every year, whether it's every second year for a major survey, whether there's little check-in surveys, I think it's healthy for the business to actually listen. It's healthy to listen to your employees to actually what they're saying, and it's healthy to listen to business. And so I think, it sounds like a lot of the business around the table have used it in different ways. So,
and at the same time of year, because the mood of the franchisees, using an ice cream franchise as an example, is going to be higher at the end of summer than it is, midway through winter. So if you're going to do it, you're going to do it regularly at that time of year. So you're comparing apples with apples.
Yeah, so it's part of your business planning cycle and you have it for 2 or 3 or whatever and the different times. So cool. So another way to sort of understand the mood of the franchise and the vibe is FACs, or Franchise Advisory Councils. So Michael, you've worked at Boost, we talked about for a long time, and I know that's part of the thing. So, but thinking more about, setting these up, how do you use the FACs? Who do you decide forms part of it? Do they rotate, whether it be at established brands like Boost or at new brands that you've worked with? So talk us through that.
Yeah, the first thing to say is there's absolutely no one right way to do it. There are multiple ways to do it. So this is what worked well at Boost, and then we would continually reinvent that, the methodology, I suppose, and it's dependent on the size of the network, the maturity, the level of engagement of the franchisees, but how we would do it. And the greatest challenge around all of that, and we spoke about it before at the start, is actually collating information and getting information back through the relevant channels within the network. And so that it's fed back up. But we had a pretty tried and true formula for that, and that we would hold geographic type cluster meetings, and then the franchisees would send information. There'd be topics. There'd be a list of topics that they would feed back information through their FAC members into support office, and then we would have a meeting where we would discuss those and get an opportunity to present and talk through them. Other things that are worth pointing out are ours was internally chaired, but some parties, some franchises choose external facilitators as well, and particularly if they're establishing or starting to establish a franchise, an FAC.
Did you ever have external people involved in it, like speaking at it, or was it always just franchisor? That's
every now and then we would get our external parties in.
Yep.
So depending on the topic, one other point of discussion that we have is, do you compensate franchisees for participating? And then there's one network that I'm involved in that one of the barriers to people putting their hand up is actually don't want to take time out of the store. So removing one of those barriers is actually, we're going to compensate you for attending and giving up your time, because we don't want them to be out of pocket in any shape or form, but we've decided that we will compensate them for attending those meetings. But then the other part of it is around qualifying criteria, and how do you choose who is going to be in the franchise? You want great balances, both be it gender, geography, tenure. Having said that, you would probably put a minimum tenure that someone needs to have been in the business. You want to get a new perspective, but someone that's too new probably doesn't have a really good handle on the business.
That's interesting. That point, because
Please.
I know working in corporate world, when you get external facilitators in and they get feedback, the business that I work with a lot, Performance by Design, they always like the feedback from the most recent person in the room, because they'll get a pretty good sense of the feel of what's going on. Interesting, they'll also possibly have different ideas because they've been somewhere else before they come in. So what sort of tenure do you think, like at Boost, obviously it was a couple of years or something like that. Yeah, you wouldn't want the newest franchisee on your...
Yeah, absolutely want them, but they really need to get a handle on the business first. It's their not loyalty, but their objective is to get a successful business up and going, and that's really important. So one that we just put together a charter for, we said you'd have to have been in the business a minimum 2 years.
Yeah.
1 year, you're just not quite there.
Yeah, so it's a distraction. But I guess maybe if that franchisee had run 5 cent churros before that and run 2, other things, they've got a lot of experience in other networks.
Exactly.
You might want to tap them on the shoulder and say, we'd love to hear how you did things at other brands.
Yeah, and how do you get them on board? I mean, they were all self-nominated predominantly, and every now and then if there wasn't a nomination, you would encourage someone to, from a particular region, to put their hand up. Sorry, Beth.
No, I was just going to say, I have been involved in systems where they have actually been quite intentional around the composition, including having a rookie. So someone who was in their first 2 years, and yes, we have to be very cognizant of their business performance, but
you don't want it to be distracting.
You don't want it to be distracting, but at the same time, acknowledging that that particular group of people who can probably be in some of their most challenging time of growing their business, that their views are represented is really, really critical. So I think a combination across the maturity of your franchisees is really worth considering in your charter, and certainly the life cycle of the switch every couple of years.
Yeah, so rotate through. Yeah. And how many do you think, is it because a board of directors is the same question, if you've got 15 on it, nothing gets done because everyone wants to speak. But if you've got 4
personal, is anything more than 8 is absolute max, but 6 is probably ideal.
But 3 or 4 is not enough.
Yeah, no, not enough diversity.
Yeah, and so if you're an emerging franchisor, which is 70% of the market with less than 25 franchisees, is it too early to set one up?
Look, I don't think it's too early. But there's probably a number that you need to hit before you actually do it, because otherwise you should be in touch with your franchisees and gauging that mood of the franchise, etc., and having those hard conversations really, really early on. But anything less than probably 10, 12 franchisees is not worth it, I would suggest.
Yeah. I'll talk about processes. We've got a question from Kate around who from the franchisor is actually on there. Like, so when we're looking at the composition, so we've got a range of franchisees from around the country and age and demographic and all that stuff. From the franchisor's point of view, is it always the same person, or is there?
Again, there's no one or right or wrong answer. And from my perspective, there was the chair and a couple of people who were constant, and then you would rotate through and have other people involved dependent on the topic. So if it was marketing related, you'd have the head of marketing or
as in for that meeting, not all of
not for the whole meeting, for the relevant sections, the topics that were in there, because otherwise it would be potentially too much of a drain on people's time.
Yeah.
So for us, our whole leadership team sits in. So basically you've got the head of marketing, the head of ops, head of IT, and basically we discuss all topics in there. So similar, like we've got 4 like selected members from each state. So the major states, Victoria, WA, New South Wales. But then what we've implemented in recent years is 2 members that we've picked, depending on what our project schedule looks like. So if we're rolling out, got a heavy IT schedule for that year, then we're going to pick franchisees that are really IT inclined to, as advisors. So they're not the ones going out and running those meetings to get the feedback. They're more as advisors on that council.
Yeah, I know you don't have them at the moment at Baker's Club.
No, but it's sort of similar. So there would always be a core
at other
brands. Yeah. There'd be a core, and then I think certainly as the system's matured, it would then be by agenda based. So you'd get brought in if there was a topic that you needed to discuss, but there would probably be a core. Typically your CEO, typically your head of ops.
Both would be there.
Both would be there for the whole meeting.
Even at bigger systems, yeah.
Yeah, even into bigger systems, and then it would be sort of by agenda item.
Roll someone else in.
The franchisees want to see the CEO there because they see then it gives that level of importance.
Yeah.
And I suppose if there was one other thing that if I was to add about the whole of FACs, it's incredibly important that the expectation is created around what are you trying to achieve or what is their scope. Because I know from a Boost perspective, it wasn't a decision-making body. It was a consultative process to the point where it was an advisory team and it's a franchise advisory council or whatever. So, yeah, it's incredibly important to understand the scope.
So the purpose of why are we setting this up?
Yeah.
And again, that's back to, as a franchisor, being really clear about that.
Yeah. I think just to add to that, what we were talking about before, like with us, we've got like a working group. So we use Basecamp. So outside of those 4 main meetings, we reach out to them on an ad hoc basis. Like if we're rolling out a new system or we want feedback on a new menu that's going to launch. So we're going back and forth. So it's not just those 4 times a year.
It's quite a dynamic relationship.
And it feels like then you're taking the team on the journey. Yeah. So you're not just reaching out once a quarter and then they're surprised about what's come up.
And so, Michael, in terms of the process of the actual meeting, is it, the franchisor is running all the ones that you've been involved in? So they're setting the agenda and...
They're not setting the agenda. The agenda is actually... Part of it's set by the franchisor, but the franchisee has input into it, and it's a shared agenda.
In one brand I was in, I actually saw this particular piece done really, really well, where it was called the GAP, the Group Advisory Panel. They actually had a group of franchisees that they actually sought feedback from. And they had to bring that feedback to the meeting because I'm sure a lot of us have experienced FACs can sometimes get a little bit toxic and become a representative of the person rather of who they're actually meant to represent. And we actually found that worked very, very well. And then there was genuine, whose view were you representing, but also a broader range of topics would come through as well because literally the whole network was able to sort of put things on the agenda as well. So quite collaborative.
And so would that be a quarterly type thing?
Yeah.
So they're all in sort of a cycle. Have you got one there?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We put out a actual Google survey.
Before the meeting?
Yeah, before the meeting. So generally a month before, Matt will send out for any items. There are very clear guidelines around what you can submit, that it has to be, to the whole benefit of the whole network, and it's got to be a genuine business need, not just your personal want or desire. So everyone has an opportunity to actually put forward topics for discussion. We'll review them and then add them to the agenda and they do have to put a business case study forward as well. So why they're actually putting that forward.
Wow. And who's chairing the meeting?
Matt and myself sit. Matt chairs it and I sit in on it.
Yeah.
And then again, as different topics, we just actually had ours yesterday, where we're talking about new pricing with change of HCP to support at home. So we had our finance team sitting in there as well to go through numbers as well as Amber and CEO.
Anyone else got any comments or questions about how they've run at, big and small organisations? Jared or Callum, at some of your previous roles or current role?
I'm happy to jump in, Bruce, if you like. Just with a couple of comments. Look, I think it's also important too that you establish some clear guidelines for how franchise advisory councils need to operate. And sometimes it can get a little murky where, franchisees think these forums are to solve individual operational issues. That's not what they're there for. And I know in all the franchise businesses I've worked for with FACs, we make it very clear to the network what the purpose of the committee is used for. And, really even in the role here at Rolled, we've made it very clear to the network that we're here for strategy. We're here to create the future direction of the business and work together. And, not here to solve individual store operating issues, But the other thing too, I just wanted to say as well, we've sort of taken our FAC a little bit further in that we really use them for strategic purposes throughout the year. So, yes, there's the consultative piece, but we use them strategically for mentoring purposes, store openings. Love it when FAC turns up to store openings, supporting new franchise partners, but also for testing. That's both testing with our great food, but also equipment, etc. as well. We get that validation from key franchise partners in our network before we roll anything out. So that's just a few things and a few ways that we've used FACs. That's
great. So with the mentoring, just drill down on a couple of those. So will you, a rookie franchisee is called, would you buddy up a FAC member with a new franchisee just every time, or is it just when you think that rookie franchisee is having a bit of trouble, rather than just hearing it from you as the franchisor, hearing it from a peer as a franchisee has worked well?
Yeah, that's right, Bruce. Look, on a needs basis at the moment, and we've got live examples happening in our network right now where we might have had a franchise partner put up their hand and say, hey, I need some more tailored help. What can you offer? And, we've been able to lean on our FAC and they've been able to help us. In fact, I've got one of my FAC members at a franchise store today with some additional coaching. So, yeah, it seems to be working well.
Just add a comment on the concept of using external people as well, particularly external chairs.
Yeah.
I'm actually a big advocate for that, and I would say as early as possible. I think it actually adds a really good dynamic. It sort of balances. It allows the CEO potentially or the head of ops to actually participate in the conversation, and I think it also allows for if that person has a lot of experience, they can bring their creativity and their new ideas. If you've got a lot of people in a system, they haven't done a whole lot of other things, it can just be a little bit cyclical sometimes and stay a little bit insular. So having external advice, I found that to be really dynamic and help actually move and innovate.
It's interesting, and obviously, we'll use Boost as an example. A lot of the people at Boost have been there a long time. They've got a lot of experience. But if you're an emerging franchisor and this is your baby and this is your business, you've only got your experience to do that. And so what we found, at BDC is that we do help some of the emerging franchisors, because some of the guys that we've got have been in lots of, and like even you, Michael, like you've worked at lots of, different brands. You've seen big and small. So you've got a range of experience rather than the franchisor who's got one. But experience.
I actually reflect on Boost, and in hindsight, we should have probably at times brought in an external chair. Absolutely.
Even at a big brand.
Yeah. I reckon it would have done, just to change it up. I'm a big one for changing stuff up.
It's the same as, like if we like it to a board of directors, the same thing. Like some boards bring in an external person to chair the board, and others just have people that are shareholders or, people involved in the business. So has anyone done that where they've had external people on there, either chairing their FSC or a participant? That's Kelly, yeah?
Bruce, we do. So as you know, we've got Tanya from BDC chairing our FAC. It's still very new. I think we're only up to meeting number 3. But for those of you that don't know, NBCM is a very unique ownership structure. So we have franchisees who are our directors. So we've got 5 franchisees on our board, all shareholders as well. So, I know. Only over a glass of wine.
She's always on holidays. That's why she's on holidays.
I'm always having a little mental health escape. But yeah, so I found that it was really, really important to get that delineation between strategy and operational, because our board meetings, especially when I first started, were very, very operational focused rather than strategically focused. I've been able to change that around heaps in the last 2 years, and now our board meetings are very, very strategically focused because we have got the FAC. And so if a board member is starting to go down an operational path, I'm very clear with them, well, maybe you need to get on the FAC, not be on the board. So for us, it's about delineating the 2 responsibilities of what's required, and having an external chair just helps to keep it really focused. And to Beth's point, it means that I can actually stand back and participate rather than trying to take it all in and chair the meeting at the same time. So the external chair for us is the way to go.
Yeah, puts a bit of structure to it. Yeah, so it's good. We might move on from FACs now just to, I guess, getting right dirty on it, and field visits and compliance. So Churro, tell us about your visitation cycles, covering the compliance checks, but also the business reviews.
Yeah, so basically we have regional managers in every state, and they have a monthly visitation cycle. So they're visiting a site at minimum once a month. Obviously, with stores that need more help, they're visiting more frequently. They're also completing compliance visits as well as business reviews. So we've, with compliance over the years at Centra, we've done it internally, we've been external, we've come back internal. But what's working for us really well now is having internal but a blended approach. So regional managers are doing just pulse checks. So, quick 45, 60-minute visit and doing that pulse check. And our OPSEX team's doing a big visit twice a year. So that's your 2 to 3 hours sort of visit and having a detailed report. What we find with that as well, it keeps your regional manager honest, and it also keeps that consistency across the brand, because that's across the country, because the same person's doing it. And then with the deep dives, they're quarterly, so booked in, and that's, we call it a deep dive, but a business review. So really dive into the health of the business.
Okay. And so with those, what you say, the health of the business. Yep. So let's dive into that a little bit further. Yep. What does that mean? So the financial health, or is it just that, or is it also it's staffing and
it's
other
everything.
things?
It's fully full review of the business. So they generally block out half a day, also try and take that franchisee out for lunch, get them out of the store as well. So we've got P&Ls across the network. Everyone uses Xero. So our regional manager's got a good insight into each person's book. So there's a lot of transparency there. So we've got a templated sort of visitation. Being in food, you're talking about your main cost drivers. So we're looking at COGS, we're looking at labour, and then not only identifying it, because most of your switch-on franchisees, they've got access to their P&Ls, they know their labour's high. So with us, it's more about how do we bring that down? How do we bring it back into model? So maybe doing a roster of them, making sure we're the right people on at the right time. But then to your point, it goes, right into delivery up times, we look at, or down times, we look at, ATV, foot count, and then dive into the HR, making sure that employees are on the right pay levels. So it's a full check of the business, but I guess
local area marketing, everything. Yep.
Yeah, local area marketing. So I guess you focus on what you need to. So once you review that P&L, if their labour's high or their COGS are high, then you're really doing that. But if you've got a great franchisee that's got all that control, they're running within model, better to model, then you're going to keep trying to grow sales. So you're going to do your local area marketing and things like that. Also use that day to sort of do a mini compliance, but do it with the franchisee there, potentially get their store manager or their duty managers to do it. So they're seeing it through the lens of the regional manager, customer, they can have that debate there. So then it doesn't become like a policing thing. It becomes more of a, we're taking you on this journey. And for us, the focus is just closing those loops, not just identifying, but making sure we're closing those loops.
And I'm really interested in that sort of balance between coaching and support on one hand and compliance and, the carrot and stick type thing when you're doing those visits. So you obviously have got people in these roles that are supporting and empathetic and trying to help the franchisee, but at different times it's like, well, you're not doing this, this and this. So how does that play out in practice?
Yeah, it's a hard one. And initially that's why we moved our compliance program externally, because, it's a hard gig to wear the good cop and be the bad cop too. What we found externally is sometimes those guys are great at, general food safety, but they don't understand the business. They don't understand our product. They don't understand the branding. So that posed its own challenges where they were then contesting it with the regional manager and, you can't just keep going back to the external person. And we found a variance between, like in bigger states like New South Wales or Victoria, the different people doing it within that company, and they were marking differently. So I think for us, bringing in was great. It is a hard challenge, but I think it's more taking that franchisee on the journey and explaining to why you're doing it. And I think the big one is, if a store is failing really badly, to get that franchisee to actually do it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the process around following up the actions that have come out of those quarterly business reviews, and how does that go?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, we use Basecamp. So every store has a project folder. And in that folder, we sort of upload their business reviews in there. We upload their compliances in there. Our finance team, something we also do is like a spotlight report where the numbers are normalized and they're done quarterly by our finance team. So it's like a benchmarking. So you can compare against the model how you're performing. So our regional managers lean on that a lot. But there's also a tool for a discussion board and to-dos. So really doing those to-dos, categorizing all our compliance questions are categorized. So like a minor or major or critical, and we've got sort of timeframes assigned to them. So you're kind of plugging it in and you're going, you've got 6 days to fix this, or you've got 3 days to fix this, and it's assigned to this person in the store, and they got to click in and tick it off, take photos to show that it's been done. And if it doesn't, then the regional manager gets a reminder and they get a reminder, and then it's about that follow-up and really closing the loop. But I think most of us are probably doing these visits in our networks, but it's easy to identify things, but the harder bit is making sure those loops are being closed.
And so when you say most people, it is interesting, again, thinking of emerging franchisors and, trying to do face-to-face visits when you've got franchisees spread out over the country and you've only got 10 franchisees and doing that. So do you know, like, what sort of, is it all face-to-face, or do you do like all of these things that you just talked about? Is all of this face-to-face, or it's online as well?
I think, coming out of COVID, that threw a spanner in the works. Yeah. Everyone's learned how to have, Google Meets or team meetings. So you could do a business review online, and at times we have, because like say our WA regional manager looks after SA as well. So they're not going to necessarily fly there twice a month, but they try to get there once a month. But then some of these meetings can happen online when you're just talking about data. But obviously to do a compliance, then you've got to be in that store.
It's interesting. One of our conferences, we asked that question, how many times do you see your franchisees face-to-face? And the variance was really high. Like, is it from twice a month, from once a week to once a year? Like it's really different as to what people do. But like, I guess that sort of embedding a culture of compliance, but not making it feel like you're policing all the time. Like, what are your thoughts, Beth, around that? So how do you get that balance right?
Yeah, and I actually really like, and I know a few other brands have moved toward that similar system of having your regional manager or your area manager responsible for an element of compliance, but also having another team that might execute some of it, because the good cop, bad cop, that is a reality of being in the field. And I think if you don't have the bad cop, it's very difficult to establish genuine relationships that can actually lead to changes in outcomes. But it can't all just sit there. So I think that's a really nice balance, and I'm seeing a lot of systems move towards that as well, where not all of the bad cop is sitting in the field teams.
Yep.
I think that is really important. But it does come back to, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but I think it does come back to what you look at, how often that you look at it, clear expectations about what compliance looks like, and sticking inside that framework. And then compliance doesn't kind of it becomes cultural behaviour rather than am I and aren't I? You start to embed it.
Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be one or the other. It's a combination of both of them. And you know, as Mark's saying, it's really the compliance part of it can be as much the carrot as the stick. Like, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
We do all of our meetings on Google Meet, so probably once a year get out. So we only have a team of 3 business coaches that actually meet. We're high touch, so every week for the first 4 months, you're having a constant touch to kind of set people up for success and get them in that habit from the beginning, rather than getting 3, 6, 12 months down the track. Now we have had those, we all have, and pulling them back in, but making sure those high touch points, the expectations are very clear. We have multiple teams, so the business coaches will do sort of our data integrity things, but because we are healthcare, we've got high legislation requirements around our care provision. So we've got a clinical auditing team, and then we have our financial auditing team as well, that all look after different components and all have input into driving that behaviour of the franchise partners.
Yeah. I think the importance is also the nature of the business, right? Coming from a sort of food background or food business where you've got bricks and mortar, you really need to visit stores. So I think that's what the franchisees really value. And I think if you're not visiting once a month, then
That's a good point. That's a really good point, though. And you're right. We all swung towards online because it's good, and it means we can have a higher touch. But I don't think anything takes away from being in a franchisee's world, being in their space, their everything, and saying, "Hey, I'm here to just spend time with you and see your spot." So I agree.
It's also different if you don't have, like most of our partners,
Correct. I don't have
water on the
correct.
Well, Matt, you've got a question about this or a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Anna was saying, and also maybe what others were talking about with the good cop, bad cop. If I go, I'll do that part first. Actually, we have a sort of system where where the business coaches provide coaching. Then if it gets a bit more serious, Anna or one of the finance team get in, and then we usually say to people, if you get an email from Matt, it means you're probably in trouble. So it's to that stage. So no one wants to get that.
That's really
Oh, if you get one from Amber, it's all over Red Rover. So yeah. But yeah, no, as Anna was saying, we do try and get out. What we try and do is, is sort of, I guess, do regional visits. So when we're doing these, we do quarterly business reviews with businesses once they've been open for 12 months or more. We find the first 12 months their head's just spinning. So after 12 months, we settle into a cycle of quarterly business reviews, and all of those quarterly business reviews, or 99% of those quarterly business reviews, I'll sit in on those as well too, so that they get a founder face kind of thing. And some will go out and do them in the field, So in this round we've just currently done, we've been down to Tassie and spent some time with our new franchise partners down there. We went to Adelaide and spent some time with our relatively new franchise partners there. And Amber and I are heading up to Brisbane on Friday afternoon to go and have a dinner with all of our Southeast Queensland franchise partners. Just so you've got that sort of additional touch point. And obviously we see them all at conference, but I think you're right. It's important just to see someone face to face as well as online. And I think for Amber and I as founders who are still working in the business, we want to be seen that we're still in touch with everybody and we're not just sort of disappearing into our offices, and never to be seen again now that we've got so many people.
Callum, what about it? Concept A, you've got a few multiple brands there. For new partners, how often are you seeing them face to face?
Yeah, so our guys are on a fortnightly cycle. I think one of the unique things about Concept Date is we have a number of virtual brands and we're heavily delivery skewed. So you kind of get feedback, a lot of feedback from customers that, you know, in other businesses you just don't. So yeah, our guys are visiting quarterly. We 2 times a year we do like a big review on our sites, and you know, we've got particular metrics around Uber and DoorDash reviews to make sure that they kind of earn the right to keep the number of virtual brands. So if we start to see a decline in service times and food quality ratings on those platforms and through our food safety measures, we temporarily take the virtual brands away, and then once we get the performance improving, we bring them back.
Cool. From a compliance perspective, one part that we did, when I say outsource, that the operations team didn't necessarily do, because it is so important, is the wage compliance. So whether it's, and you know, I know Baker's outsourced theirs to a legal firm, we outsourced ours to the HR team, but given the level of importance and focus and vicarious liability, there was a preliminary check done around that, but a big part of that was just outsourced.
So we're the same.
Yeah, right, there you go.
It gets done excellently, but it's more that coaching piece to make sure that, you know, your team members on the right levels and sort of picking it up so you don't end up getting to the end of the year and you've got to do a big back payment and you're caught. Yeah.
We might move to our final topic, which is sort of a segue of some of the things you talked about, which is data. So when you talk about compliance, you've got to have data to be able to measure for compliance. So Beth, we'll go to you first. What level of reporting is used for a franchise system, and what are you reporting on?
I think obviously, you know, well, for me, data is the absolute bedrock of operations. Data and reporting is what optimises an operations team and makes them essentially effective. In terms of the level, I think you need to be really structured, consistent, and make sure that your data is actually actionable. So they're the 3 key things that sort of, you know, I'm looking at. You talked about a lot of them, Mark, but at a minimum, you should be collecting data, in my opinion, on financial performance, operational metrics, marketing activity, customer experience, compliance, brand standards, and people and culture. So understanding what you need to collect and what is meaningful for your particular brand across those key areas, I think is really, really critical. I've been in franchising for quite a long time now, and I often, I think it's changing now with the amount of access we have to technology and data, but I know that data and reporting can sometimes be difficult to retrofit. So for the emerging franchisors on the call, I cannot stress enough how imperative it is to start collecting data and think about how to use it meaningfully in your operations.
I think Baker's Delight, where you are now, is probably famous for the collection of data and the transparency of that data. Yes. So do you want to, my understanding of it is that everybody knows everybody else's numbers, you know, and that's something that happens regularly. So maybe we'll talk about that and compared to other systems.
Yeah, and I think, look, am I right? And I probably the last 3 or 4 systems that I've worked in have moved towards that. And again, from an operational perspective, it is an absolute game changer when everyone can see those metrics and can see what it is that they're working towards. And it's about creating a culture of, I guess, excellence and optimization and benchmarking. It's very difficult to go out into the field and you might have some or no data, but what am I comparing that to? What should I be working towards? What other franchisees in my area are doing this better than I am, so that I can actually go and talk to those people? I think that's where probably in recent years I've seen the real potential unlock is where you could do peer-to-peer mentoring, like we were saying before, utilising that data and reporting. So again, it can be difficult to retrofit, but if you have an opportunity to put in data and put it in a really transparent fashion, again, you'll work out what is right for you and your brand. And I would also suggest including your franchisees on that. Include your franchisees on what we should be collecting and what we should be sharing.
It's really interesting when you say it's hard to retrofit. That's because your franchise agreement doesn't provide for it. And so, but if there's a trust element there at the start, it's not that hard.
It is. It really isn't. And I think, again, if you've got the opportunity to simply make it part of your business format, then you never really have an issue with it. But also, if it actually becomes the thing, like I just wrote down here, a shared language for performance. If it actually becomes, I call it the coffee table, it sits there in between every conversation, your data and your reporting, and you're talking about it in a really meaningful way, and it's underpinning your actions, and it's actually talked about at every level of the business. It isn't actually a separate thing. It's actually embedded.
Yeah. So obviously, Michael, you spent a bit of time at Baker's Delight in the early days as well, but then now working with some emerging systems. So how do you?
Yeah, look, I wholeheartedly agree with everything Beth said. And to your one thing that you said there, there's some franchise systems that actually have it in their franchise agreements, but didn't institute those systems and processes early on. So as Beth said, retrofitting is really, really hard. One other point that Baker's did really early on was to the point where they had an annual conference, and then I think it's come every 2 years now, but the name badges and the lanyards, the name badges would have on them what your COGS were, what your labour were, what your 12-month MATs. That's the level of sharing. So they colour-coded things. It was quite amazing.
Anyone else has done that? No.
I think we did it once, maybe. Boost. Yeah.
Copy not well.
No. Boost has the same level of transparency, pretty much. Yeah. So we've got that same level amongst the franchisees. So it wasn't an issue. But yeah, from a data perspective, though, it's also choosing what you're going to focus on, because you can't focus on everything. So there are times where you'll be focusing on or spend a period of time, 3-6 months. These are the areas that we're focusing on, and because there is a lot of data out there. So choosing the areas that you're going to focus on is incredibly important.
If I could just pick up on that point, because it's really critical, is there's a lot of platforms out there that you can use. Creating an environment where you can actually have a data warehouse with all of your raw data in it, and then having either the people or the systems to be able to slice and dice that data in the moments that it's needed. And of course, you'll have repetitive and dashboards and scorecards and things like that. But if I can give another encouragement, it's to think bigger, think future, and think about data warehousing and platforms that you can actually grow into, even if you're not at that size, because you might pick a small CRM or a small system and grow out of it really, really quickly. So definitely do your research on how to collect, store, and then report back your data, because you want to be able to know, hey, when time comes to focus on that particular thing, I can quickly grab that report out of it.
Well, yeah, the platform itself, I guess, again, thinking about, you're saying as an emerging franchisor, it could be cost prohibitive and also may not understand the value of it, sort of looking at the later down the path. And
it's okay to, again, it doesn't always have to be the sexiest system out there in the beginning. But I think thinking, data warehousing, even if the platform that you spit it back into is a relatively simple one in its first iteration, that's also okay. But starting to collect the data is really, really critical.
And sorry, Mark.
Yeah, no, there's a company that I'm working with, this franchisor here. They're just about to sign their first franchisee. The data that he's collected, because he's got 2 sites or 2 territories that he's been working, the data that he has is absolutely amazing. And he is a young guy that understands the value in data and is incredible. And then, the way he can then use that to sell his franchises is incredible too. So he gets it inherently from the start. So it's great.
So I guess, Beth, then it's getting the franchisees across, not only accessing the data, but what do they do with it? How do they interpret it?
Correct.
Which sort of loops back, I guess, into your coaching and support.
It actually really does. And I think, so I put a few things down. Obviously you have to make the data meaningful. So you need to make sure that it focuses directly on what impacts them. And that could be a different thing, but it needs to reflect their priorities. You have to integrate reporting and data into regular conversations. It's par for the course. It's part of every day. And I think with your operations team, because it doesn't always come naturally to operations people, data reporting, finance, it's not always their jam. It certainly wasn't mine. But starting to create a data-first mindset with your operations team for me, once I got my head across the data that particular business needed, it actually unlocked a whole lot of potential in my ability to coach people better, because in every meeting at every franchise, we're talking about the same things. So I think really working with your ops team to implement that. Obviously, creating the accountability structures, and I know different systems will have different perspectives on transparency and how much you share, but my view is share, and work out how that works, within your system. Because it does foster transparency, fosters a little bit of healthy competition, and then hopefully some really good rapport and relationship building. I think also really important, depending on your system and depending on the type of franchisee that you attract, recognise and support different capability levels. Not everyone understands data. Not everyone understands, profit and loss statements or whatever it might be. So make sure your franchisees are also trained in your expectations about the data, and that if people need one-on-one support, that they can actually access that. And then just lastly, it has to be linked back to business growth, as everything we're talking about. It definitely has to be linked back so that they can see and they can measure, hang on, talking about that, understanding that, creating actions around that help me to unlock another 1% here or 2% there.
Sure.
I liked your comment on, how do you share the data, and that you say share. There are a lot of partners out there that don't want to share their revenue. So we've actually now created graphs. So we actually take all revenue away and just have a ladder. So get creative on how you actually share data without providing data. I'm sure people get out there with their rulers and go,
well, you don't have to name everyone all the time. Like, I've been at systems where the top 5 would get named because they were happy to, and then the others might be redacted. But I think gradually over time, what happened was people actually wanted to see, and everyone relaxed and realised we're not here to judge each other. We're actually all here to succeed, to grow our businesses, and the more we can sort of, learn from each other. This was bigger back in motion. We had a lot of transparency there, but they were always hunting to try and beat someone on that list.
I think to your point, with us, we're very transparent. So we got Power BI reports.
Yep.
You can drill into any store you like. You can see, the transaction count, ATV, product mix, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we don't share stores, COGS, labour, and, the EBITDA and stuff like that. But we have been previously, but anonymously, and it ranks you to your state and then to the national average. So at least you don't know who's above you, but you know where you sit. So, it's actionable.
You can't action or shift the needle on your business if you don't really know where you fit or what you could be achieving.
Yeah.
And data informs all of that.
Yeah.
So, Kayla, you work with big and small systems with dashboards and data. Have you got giving advice to sort of bigger or small systems about using data and platforms? You're on mute there.
Sure. Trying to find the button. I think everyone has had a lot of really good feedback around the data collection side of things. There's another angle to the data collection, and that plays into the AI space, which is kind of an emerging territory when it comes to reporting and being able to analyze that data. But I forget who said it, but starting data collection as early as possible really is key, because you can obviously do your manual reporting from that, but then also as the technology emerges and tools become available, you're well equipped to literally just plug that into AI tools, and then a lot of that manual effort can be taken away, and you can move on to bigger and better things. So yeah.
We've got 2 minutes left. So if there's one last question or comment from anyone, any questions from the audience that you didn't ask on the way through? I was asking you more questions, but that's all right. Anything else? Around the table? We covered off on all our franchisees are all successful now. We've worked it out. We've given them, we've got some feedback from them. We've worked out the FACs. We've used some compliance. Use some data.
There's no silver bullet to it. You've got to do a lot of things. You got to call the 1%.
Yeah. George, I might get you to pull up the other slide if you want to just a couple of things coming up. But yes, I think that's a good answer. I'm a franchisee as well, and I'd love to find that silver bullet on my side. We've got a couple of things coming up at the FCA. So next week, if you are, there's the awards. So in June. Who's going to Sydney to go? We're going to learn during the day, Helen.
Yes.
Do a bit of learning, and then we're going to go and frock up, go to some awards. We've got a lot of. How many people did you tell me before?
So there's 83 individual
finalists, and there is 56 brands represented in that.
Oh, it'll be a big party that night,
Big
okay,
party, yeah.
at the Fullerton. So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see all of you up in Sydney for the big party and do a bit of learning during the day. Next week, if any of your businesses are in the US or heading to the US, we're doing another webinar next Wednesday morning off the top of my head. There it is, 8 a.m. because I've got the panel, I've got Ali and Liz, who are both US based. One's a lawyer, one's a consultant. Ali worked for Lyft Brands, so she's got a lot of experience working in the Australian market and has worked with other brands as well as part of her consulting business. So I tapped all the people that have been to the IFA the last couple of years to that are either in the US or coming. But if that's something to jump online so we can have a discussion about doing business in the US. And I've already warned them that we are going to ask questions about Trump, so they need to know. They need to be right across it. I've given them a week's warning. Tariffs and Trump will come up at some point on that conversation.
Just register on our website, just like you did for this one. Just register, and we'll send you the link in your calendar.
Cool. Right on time.
Right
We're
on.
done. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. Thank you for my panel around the table. Great to see you.
Send you the recording.
We'll send you the recording. Great.
Enjoy the sun, Kelly.
Thanks, guys. Bye.